Catherine Freshley is here today, and she made it through the long meeting yesterday. And this was, it was about, I think it's a little over 7 hours, I believe.
mean,
there was a break.
We're not trying to set any records.
No, there's a break that was taken.
Yeah.
However, during the playback of it, what we do is we actually pause the recording so people aren't watching just GRF board and recess for an hour. So we kind of cut. We don't edit it, but we just stop the tape and start it up again when you guys come back.
And our recess was only a half hour. We tried to get it done, Yeah,
it was. So there was an awful lot on the agenda yesterday. One of the, I think it's a very difficult subject in that is when it comes to the clubs, and you talked about this.
Right.
And on one hand, you folks talked about there are a lot of clubs that may be taking advantage of the situation of a fairly low cost and renting something out, and then using it in a way to raise funds or outside vendors coming in or whatever it might be. And yet, in some hand, you had some folks on the board that said, boy, do we really want to restrict it? It's a very tricky situation,
It's a difficult one, and I think my own opinion is that, in fact, I was thinking about it this morning, how do we handle this?
Yeah.
And part of it is a better definition of a club.
Yes.
And what is the purpose of a club?
Mm-hmm.
See, because we don't have any difficulty with clubs if they are having to raise funds for operating purposes.
Of course,
once or twice a year.
Sure.
Or most clubs, have a membership fee. Because as you're aware, I'm president of the Foreign Policy Association.
Mm-hmm.
That's a club. And so we have a fee which covers the cost of the room and covers the cost of the book.
Yes, it
and
does.
so we rent the rooms for the period we're there. Okay? We don't do any separate fundraisers because we really don't need any additional funds than what we have. Some clubs do other things, like the Cat Club was raising money because they were spending money in trying to take care of cats where somebody from the village may be moving into assisted living or something like this, and so they have an animal, and so they need somebody, if they can take it off their hand and find somebody else to board it for them, or to at least to make a smooth transition relative to the animal, rather than just letting it, turning it out. So they do raise some funds because they spent, if I recall the number, close to $16,000 last year. So they need some kind of fundraiser to help support in that activity.
Sure.
And I don't think anybody on the board is in opposition to any of that. Mm-hmm. What we're really trying to focus on is that we've had over the years, and this started back in the right around 2000 when, from what I understand, we had reclassified ourselves for income tax purposes as in order to be called a nonprofit, and in order to have the benefit of that, to be a nonprofit and take advantage of that tax basis, we then could not be a closed community. We had to be open.
Yes.
And so at that point, that kind of opened up the whole thing as to we're no longer a closed community, now we're open community. To try to bring that back so that the utilization of our facilities is by the membership who are supporting it.
Yeah.
I mean, because every one of our rooms, if you look at the recreation list, almost all the rooms that basically where people rent for activities, those rooms are supported to close to 90% or over 90% shared cost.
Yes. Yes.
So the real cost of that is being carried by the whole community, and that's one of the things that we're finding that is really, we think, is unfair. We're asking the community to pay most of the cost and the maintenance cost and the depreciation of facilities cost, and somebody else is coming in here and renting a room and then using it for revenue raising purposes that is not for charitable purposes. For their own purposes.
Right. Some of them, the clubs, and one was there yesterday, is sort of kind of caught in that middle ground, and it was, boy, I forget the exact name, but they support the Sigerson Center. Very good organization.
Right.
And as the woman who stood there saying, well, that's what we are, And of course, there are national organizations, there are chapters like the DAR, for
Right.
example, where they have fundraisers throughout once a year,
Right.
whatever it may be, not for funds for this community, but hey, we're part of the DAR or whatever it may be.
Right.
And so those clubs are kind of like, well, it's an important club. They do a great thing. It's a charitable
That's right.
organization. It may not directly benefit the community, but we have a lot of folks here
That go
who
to
do
Searism.
benefit from being, yes,
That's right.
exactly. Those are
Yeah.
kind of like caught in the middle, aren't they?
Yeah, and we're going to have
And you
to...
discussed that yesterday.
Yeah, and that's going to be a challenge because we're going to have to really think through that issue as to
Right.
how do we treat something like that. Because there are some that are blatantly taking advantage.
Yes, yes,
and,
there
you know,
are.
And that's what we really want to stop.
Yeah,
And you know, and so that's, but it's a long process. We got to really think through those issues. We're going to have to really define and maybe even address the issue: what is a club?
yeah,
You know, how do you, who classifies? What is the classification of a club?
right. And I know it can be difficult for staff sometimes. You know, I've worked here since 2001, and I think every other year, at least, maybe every year, this situation comes up, and sometimes the rules have been loosened, saying, well, we can't really discriminate. Okay, everybody, you could be. It's a very hard thing. It's very hard.
And that's one of the things we're going to really. In fact, I think we're going to have kind of a legal opinion. There was a
Yeah,
legal opinion
yeah.
before. We're going to have to really carefully review this.
Yeah.
And then take the time to write down a good set of a description or rules that can be easily administered by the recreation department, because we've got to make it so that the clerical people there, the ones that are renting the rooms, have a very clear understanding,
Yeah,
so that we're not putting them in the position of having to decide
to be the traffic cop, so
to
to
be the
speak.
that really kind of
Yeah.
we can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, it gets
It's the-
confusing.
That's right. It's the board's responsibility to really address that issue, and so we will take it up and we'll do it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while, and
it's-
unfortunately, what we're trying to do is make
Yeah.
it so that these discussions are not, the full discussion is not always in committee. I mean, we could always put it behind the scenes in committee. Hardly anybody comes to a committee meeting, and then when it gets to the board, we just move ahead with it and pass
Yeah.
it. You know, as I said yesterday, one of the things that is one of the legs of my three-legged stool for having effective governance is having openness. And part of that openness is having complete discussions so that the community has an understanding, a better understanding of what we're doing. And that's why we've taken a lot of the conversations that might have been only done in committee and bringing them more onto the board where it's televised.
Right.
Now, a solution would be if we started televising committee meetings, then we wouldn't need to spend as
Right,
much time.
but there's how many committee meetings?
But
Yeah.
there's a
And
lot
those
of
committee
meetings
meetings are important.
And the committee meetings are important.
Yeah.
But a lot of residents, for whatever reason, are not able to attend.
Right, and I know because the one that I usually go to is the Media and Communications Committee meeting because for obvious reasons.
Right.
And I don't always stay because I have other things I have to do, but it really shows that you get into that when we're talking about that particular committee. People that do come there can really get answers and
That's right.
at length ask certain questions, and it's a great benefit. So
Oh, it is.
It very much is. And when we talk about them, we always say when the committee meetings are, but
Yeah.
as you said, for whatever reason.
And you know, when you come to those committee meetings, if you have 10 people in the room, you're
Yeah.
lucky. I mean, oftentimes
right.
there's more directors
You're absolutely
than
right.
than there are residents participating.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, exactly. But that's like the ground floor on that.
That's right.
You talked about yesterday, obviously it was several things, but although this is a minor issue, but you guys talked about re-upping the membership with CAI and things like that, and there was a little discussion about that it's, in a sense, I'll let you explain it, but in a sense it's like a trade organization,
It
for
is.
lack of a better word.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the board decided not to renew with CAI. We are going to renew with ECHO, okay, which is the group out of Northern California, and we're gonna subscribe to what is called California Homeowners Association, which is out of Oakland.
Right.
And part of the reasoning that was being presented was that CAI seems to be more focused on at least their positions of representing the managing agents versus the homeowners themselves. At least that seems to be the perspective that many board members perceive. Whether that's true or not, it's an individual judgment.
Right.
All you have to do is read the material, and you can say, yeah, this is their orientation, or it isn't. Okay. And so it came down to orientation, and it's less expensive, these other two, because CAI was $750 for us, annual subscription, whereas ECHO was something like $450 or $500.
Yeah, I haven't heard of ECHO. The other one, the California one, but ECHO.
And California
I haven't heard of
Home
that
Law
one.
was like $50
Yeah.
for the year. Okay, so.
And these are organizations that you, as a governing body,
Right.
you can get input from. You can, like,
Absolutely, yeah.
you talked about yesterday, and we'll get into this in just a moment, about delinquencies.
Yeah.
Well, this is an organization you can go to and go, you know what, you guys, how do you guys handle this? And
Right.
and so it is, like I said, a trade organization.
It's a trade
ideas.
That's
and
right.
things.
Yeah. And since you mentioned delinquencies, that's something that we're going to really try to be. You know, I personally feel that, having been so many years on a housing mutual board, that, you know, one of the things as GRF, and this is my own feeling because I know some of the other board members felt a little bit differently, we as GRF have to be absolutely supportive of the housing mutuals. I'm going to be checking to see if there's a means for us where, because the housing mutuals were asking that, because one of the things that seems to speed up somebody if they're delinquent is if you disconnect the television.
Yes.
Then they seem to all of a
Because
sudden
people
they
wanna
find the
watch
money.
me.
Because they want to watch all of us. So, but I think that you know, so.
But that
we're
does
gonna
work.
check.
It's interesting.
It
Yeah.
does work.
Yeah.
Now the issue with many of the, you know, because the GRF directors were spending an awful lot of time on a lot of different issues.
Yeah.
To hold separate disciplinary hearings or similar to that is just then one more burden on us, because
Exactly.
we also hold the traffic court. We're required to hold the traffic hearings and things. So I'm going to take a look and see if we might be able to, talking to the attorney, see if there's a way that we can kind of tail in that if the housing mutual says this is what we want to do, then then GRF board doesn't have to hold a separate hearing.
Right.
That maybe we can just flow it through, because the hearing has already been held.
Right, and you're just
in housing,
implementing
and
what
we're
is
just
being requested.
implementing
Yeah.
what's being requested, and
Yeah.
see if there isn't a way to do that without having us to hold a formal hearing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, remember one of the things I said last month was, remember, we got the 3 silos,
Yeah.
which I find when you got those different silos, it makes it hard to be visioning yourself as one community. And what we're after is trying to set, so we're functioning as one community.
And one of the, and you just kind of mentioned that, and we had Ray Gross on here the other day talking about traffic court. And one of those things, as he said, and I know you've talked about it,
Right.
let's bring this under one thing.
Right.
Where there's one traffic court, whether you live in United, Mutual, it doesn't matter. You go to one place, it happens once
Right.
a month or whatever.
Right.
And it makes sense instead of holding 3.
That's right. It reduces the burden on,
Yeah.
on those of us who are serving. You know, and because, you know, we do put a lot of time into serving the community,
Yeah.
and you know, we get paid an enormous amount of money.
Yes, you do.
You know, if we're lucky if we
You get
even get
coffee.
a cup of coffee.
And it's not very good coffee, but you get coffee.
Sometimes it is. You know, so that's one of the, you know, so that's really comes down to the same issue. So
Yeah.
we're going to look at some of these and see if there's a way to handle that. And maybe it can be done through consent calendars or things like this, where
Yeah.
it's just a matter of passing it.
Right,
See.
but and it is, again, like you said, it's one of those things that for for the residents here, at times it's very confusing to them.
Right.
Where, okay, where do I go for this? I live in United, but is this a GRF thing? Is this, and it's streamlining, making it easy for everyone to kind of figure out, I've got this problem here, here's exactly where I need to go.
And this is one of our goals, is trying to make it so that from the standpoint of governance,
Yeah.
that we simplify it, make it easy for people to understand how the community functions.
Exactly. One of the other things that that you were talking about yesterday with Chris Robinson is this ongoing process of scanning
Right.
old legal opinions, going way, way, way back, and the amount there is to scan and how much of it to,
Right.
when I'm talking about scanning, obviously making it digital so it's
Right.
easy to get to.
Right.
And that was discussed as to in what detail do you go down to?
Well, that's
And there are
right.
differing
There's
opinions on
differing
that.
opinions, yeah. The opinion of some of the attorneys on the board is we want every document, every note, every piece of document.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. And because that becomes critical if for any reason there was some lawsuit involved or something like this, then every note and everything that's been transcribed on the paper, you'd like to have available.
Right.
And so that's what the discussion was about. I know that the scanning has been something that's been ongoing for many years.
Yeah.
I remember when it first came up, I was on the Third Mutual Board at the time, and we were talking about, and just making sure that we got all the engineering documents at the time. I was involved in that part of
Yeah.
it in M&C, making sure we're getting all those scanned so that it becomes easy to look up the drawings, the building the documentation for clubhouses, or the documentation for some of our manors as to how they're built, and having
Yeah.
all that so it's readily available. That really is the cost improvement that our society has really learned to do and has implemented. I mean, that's one of the things, private industry was really working on this, because historically, as you know, I'm an engineer, and from an engineering standpoint, being able to call up the documentation at a desk. I mean, I remember back in the old days, you had to put a request in,
Yeah.
you send it down to
Yes.
the file room, the file room
Yeah.
would pull up the documents. It may be a day later. If you were in a big hurry, you go down there and you'll maybe wait a half hour and you finally get the documentation and everything you needed in order to process. This is where, the digital revolution that has occurred in the country has been so valuable,
It has.
because it has brought to an individual at their desk a wealth of information.
It's just catching up to, and we're all,
That's right.
even for us here, taking old tapes and things and converting them to digital, and
That's
the
right.
same
Well,
thing.
look at what
It's time
the
consuming, but
doctors' offices are doing.
yeah, exactly.
See, part of that, the program, the health program, was requiring that doctors now digitize all of the files that they have on all their individuals. Well,
Yeah.
I know my internist I've been going to for 25 years. I mean, when I go in there, they have just racks of
They
files.
still do. Yes.
And they're having to go through the cost then of digitizing all that and getting it so that it becomes more readily available, then not only to the doctor, but to others within the healthcare system,
Right.
to get the productivity up within healthcare. And so this is something that's just part of society's
ongoing
changes.
thing.
It's the change that we're living through, and those of us who, I have one friend who is over 100, and when you listen to him and talk about the things
Yeah.
that he has seen within his own life,
amazing.
he graduated from college before I was born. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can see there's a lot involved here, and we have to we're kind of running out of time here for our
okay,
segment.
yeah.
And I want to mention that, again, we're going to re-show the GRF meeting at 1:30 on Thursday, and I think it's about 7 hours, if I'm not mistaken, and then our news will replay after that. Then again, as you can see, on Wednesday, January 14th, it's 6 o'clock.
And I will be calling for all the boards. We're going to do the workshop on getting
Okay.
through that delegation of
Right.
authority, because to me that's kind of critical in helping the corporations function
Right.
effectively with the managing agent. Let's define the roles more clearly.
Yes, sir.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, yes, definitely.
See?
It makes it easy for everyone, I think.
That's
doesn't
right.
It?
It does.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's good to see you.
Well, thank you
And
very
you made
much.
it through?
Oh, yeah. I went to bed at 9 o'clock last night.
All right.
I usually don't go to bed till 11.
There you go. We'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
You know.